everybody. Sorry I'm a little late tonight. I'll give everybody a few minutes to pop in. Shit, I need my glass. Hey everyone, I had to go get my glasses. Blind as a bat without them. I end up going, what do you see? So I've got my little old lady glasses. It's nice to see everybody here. Rose, I'm glad to see you made it back. Hey April. Yay, I'm glad to see everyone. I'm hoping tonight to get through the last 5 chapters. We went up to see my family in West Virginia last week, and on the way home, some lady, as we're getting on the plane, blessed Tim with a shower of uncovered coughing. So, now he shared it with me. So you'll have to pardon me. I'll be taking drinks every once in a while, and I just feel a little yuck. So I'm going to do my best to get through the last 5 chapters. I might have to cut it short if it gets too bad. But yeah, gotta love people sharing their germs. It's awesome. So I hope you guys had a great time since the last time we talked. I know I haven't posted any content. Honestly, I am out of books and I am producing some myself. People have suggested doing some of them with AI, and I really, really don't want to do that. I've kind of checked into it. I'm not really happy with how it sounds. It just doesn't sound natural. You can't get the different characters' voices. So I'm not interested in going that route. But I am narrating some of my own books. I know I had a little bit of pushback from a couple of people about doing that because, basically you write great books. That's what you do. Leave the narration to the people who do great narration. So I don't want to hurt, I don't want to annoy anybody, but I do want to give it a shot because right now, I have about 40 books that aren't in audiobook. So to have those all done would cost me $60,000 to $70,000. So obviously, if some of those are going to get in, I'm going to have to find an alternate way to do that. So yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to the story. Last time we ended at chapter 18. And April, I do appreciate that. I've had a lot of people tell me that too. A lot of people are saying what you do, hey, we prefer author narration. It would be great. I guess, I don't know, because of some people have listened to this live reading and they think that I don't do that good of a job. And honestly, I mean, in fairness, I can see that because I stumble sometimes. I get the voices a little wrong sometimes, but if I'm doing the actual narration, of course, I have editing software and I can make sure it's right. And pardon me. But yeah, we'll give it I'll give it a shot. I agree. I agree. And if Neil Gaiman can do it, why not? What's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't come out very, doesn't sound very good, right? I mean, hey, never know till we try, right? Okay. Here we go then. We were on chapter 18 is where we left off. Pardon the coughing, just in advance. I do have my tea, so without further ado. Chapter 18. It wasn't hard to figure out which house had the Great Dane. Only one was fenced in, and the sound of baying from the backyard was a dead giveaway. Apparently, Prudence wasn't a dog person, but that made me wonder what had happened to Sarah. We didn't want to park right in front of the house, so we parked on the street halfway up the block and walked the rest of the way. Put your glamours back on, Luther said. The last thing we need is for her to recognize us and jump out of the body before we can lock her in it. Something innocent, blue utility uniforms. The wave of energy from all of us using magic at once made my ears pop, and I noted in the back of my mind that Luther's felt different than the rest. Not surprising, I suppose, but it was a piece to add to the puzzle when I wasn't about to go up against my first angry spirit. It felt strange looking at Eli, Luther, and Jake and knowing who they were but not recognizing them. I realized this was how Harry, Hermione, and Ron must have felt when they were going into the Ministry of Magic to save the day. Luther stepped forward and rang the bell while the rest of us stood back. Nobody answered at first, so he knocked. I was starting to think he was an idiot for thinking a serial killer was just going to unlock the door when he did exactly that. What? The 30-something man in a wrinkled suit snapped, and just with that simple slip, I knew we had her. I'd memorized the binding spell, so I started it. Then Jake, Eli, and Luther joined in. No! Prudence/John shouted, but Luther pushed him back inside before he alerted the whole neighborhood. We followed, and I slammed the door shut, locking it behind me before I threw a silencing spell around Prudence/John. Prudence is in John's body. She tried to scream, and when nothing came out, she winged an R2-D2 paperweight right at me. Considering it went right through the wall, I was glad I ducked just in time. Some disconnected part of my brain registered that these people were huge Star Wars fans. The paperweight was just the beginning. Lightsabers hung crossed above the fake fireplace, and a huge picture of them in Han Solo and Princess Leia cosplay costumes sat on the mantle. He was probably a pretty cool guy when he wasn't possessed with a spirit who was trying to kill me. Adrenaline coursed through me as I poured more magic into the binding spell, and it paid off a few seconds later. John shuddered a little as the magic wove through the air in the living room, then gave a silent scream of frustration. Eli cast a paralyzing spell, and John dropped to the couch behind him. "That'll do it," Eli said, rolling his head on his shoulders. "Now what?" Muffled sounds filtered down the stairs from somewhere on the second floor. "Hopefully that's Sarah and she's not hurt," I said, then rushed up the steps, half afraid of what I was going to find. Eli and Jake were right on my heels, and I held up a hand. The noises were coming from behind a door at the end of a hallway. I gathered my magic, and when I pushed through, a dark-haired woman about the same age as John lay tied to the bed by her wrists and ankles. She stared at me, wide-eyed with terror. "Sarah?" I asked, then did a quick magical scan to make sure all was as it appeared. When I found nothing amiss, I motioned for Eli and Jake to step back. The last thing she needed was a room full of strangers. "Let me get her untied and settled." They nodded, but didn't move farther than the hall right outside the door. Yell if you need us." I rushed toward her and untied her hands. She pulled the gag out of her mouth and untied one leg as I got the other. "He's lost his mind," she hissed, careful to keep her voice low. "I came back from a trip this morning and he was a raving lunatic, speaking in some weird language. We had to get out of here." "Everything's okay," I said, trying to infuse calm into my tone as she shoved off the bed. She swayed on her feet and took a few wobbly steps toward the door, and I wondered how long she'd been tied up. "We have him subdued downstairs, and this nightmare is going to be over soon, I promise." "Is she all right?" Eli asked, popping his head through the doorway. Sarah's gaze flashed to me. "He's with me," I told her before replying to him. "Yeah, she's going to be fine." "Good. Catch her," he said, then flicked his wrist. "Somnum." I barely realized what he was doing in time to keep her from dropping like a sack of potatoes. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "She was calming down." "Yeah, just in time to freak out again," Jake replied as he rushed forward to help me get her back on the bed. "You don't honestly think she was going to be okay watching us exorcise a spirit from her husband, do you?" He had a point. "Fine, but we wake her up before we go this time. And we do right by her memories. We can't just wipe her brain like a dry erase board." "Agreed," they both said. By the time we got back downstairs, Sybil was there. Where'd you come from? I asked, glancing toward the door. Believe it or not, I know how to teleport, she replied, brow arched and her tone laced with sarcasm. It's much more efficient and less pretentious than my caddy. Ha ha, I said, smirking at her. So we're doing this here instead of taking him to your place? She nodded. We are. I think it's for the best. We can do a muffling spell so that the neighbors don't hear. The silencing spell you cast on John won't hold after we start separating the souls, so we need that extra layer of protection. Luther picked John/Prudence up and tossed them over his shoulder like they were a sack of potatoes. Does he know what's going on? I asked, shuddering at what it would feel like to be locked in your own brain while somebody else was at the wheel. I mean, is he in there and aware? She lifted a shoulder. That varies from possession to possession. The important thing is that we make sure he's definitely still in there. I've only seen it a few times, but in theory, it's possible she tossed his soul clear out. If so, we have a much bigger problem. She didn't, Luther said, his tone sure as he carried John's body up the stairs. I checked while they were upstairs and I was waiting for you. He's still in there, though she's got a stranglehold on him. Luther tipped the body onto the bed, and I ran into the room where Sarah was and grabbed the bindings that Prudence had used to tie her up. In just a couple minutes, we had John's body secured. Eli and I both cast muffling spells around the perimeter of the room, and I put one around the whole house just in case. Better too much than not enough. Ready? Sybil asked Luther, and he nodded. Aren't you going to use holy water or crosses or something? I asked, then felt silly. Sybil rolled her eyes at me. At least you answered it for yourself, even if you did say it out loud before you did. Luther reached for her hand. You ready? It's been a while. She pulled in a deep breath and nodded as she reached for his hand. As soon as they were joined, they started a chant. No! John screamed as the silencing spell broke, his voice higher than it should have been. He tipped his head forward so he could see us. I'm not leaving! Luther and Sybil increased the volume and the magic in the room made the hair on my arms stand up. A strange wind kicked up in the room, blowing the curtains and knocking knickknacks off the dresser. John's body seized, and I swear it was just like in the movies. His back arched, and he screamed. The lights in the room flickered, and the wind blew even harder as Sybil and Luther continued the spell. He twisted and jerked and fisted his hands, but as the chant crescendoed, John's body started vibrating, sort of. I squinted. It was almost like I had double vision, or like he had an aura. The colors separated, and the wispy form of an infuriated woman pulled upward from him to hover above the body. Her blonde hair blew around her, and her eyes glowed red as she let loose with an unearthly howl that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Luther and Sybil changed their chant as soon as she was free. It was still in Latin, so I focused on every word. They were performing a banishing spell, repeating the lines without pause. Prudence's form swept toward them, hatred carved into her face. Jake, Eli, and I joined hands with them, pouring our magic into the spell. All of a sudden, it felt like a giant water balloon popped in the room. Prudence disappeared, and our magic collapsed in on itself. The wind died down, and silence settled around us, the kind where you can almost hear dust moving through the air. The dog's barking filled it in after a few seconds as normal returned. Is it over? I asked, my gaze roaming over the room in search of any signs of wisps or stray bursts of energy or a flash of blonde hair. Nothing stirred. John was unconscious but breathing. Yep, Sybil said, brushing off her hands. For now. This was a bad curse, but it's not the worst you're going to have to deal with. That's okay, though, Luther said, smiling at me. We'll be around when you need us. Yeah, Eli said, eyeing Luther with a speculative look on his face. And I suspect even when we don't. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I did realize we might find ourselves in over our heads sometimes and was grateful to know we had backup just in case. Sybil bent over John and gave his shoulder a shake. He stirred and opened his eyes, then struggled to sit up, fear and confusion scrawled across his features. Who are you? Why are you in my house? Sybil laid a hand on his arm, and her voice was soft. That's not what matters. What's your name and where do you work? John Hennessy. I'm a financial advisor for Burke and Burke. Okay, John, she said. Somnum. He closed his eyes and relaxed back on the bed. Okay, she said, turning to us. His brain's not scrambled and prudence is gone. I trust you three can clean up here. I turned to Eli. Will you do the memories? I hated to ask him to use his mind magic, but I didn't know Luther or Sybil enough to trust them to be merciful. Even though he hated it, his mother had made him master it. She was like my parents in that respect. Magic was a responsibility and control was critical. He nodded. Good. Then we'll see you three later. We need to talk about your plan going forward. She took Luther's hand, and before I could say another word, they disappeared. Wow, Jake said. Magical version of Dine and Dash. I'm okay with it, Eli said. I think at least for now, we should do what we can on our own. I'm not sure what I think about them yet. Jake gave a curt nod. Agreed. Now, let's finish up and get out of here. You two go do that, and I'll handle the rest of this mess. Eli and I headed to Sarah's room. What should I do? He asked. Keep it simple, I said. They're Star Wars fans, so maybe they binge-watched the movies all day. He smiled, because though he'd never taken his own addiction as far as cosplay, it was only because I'd put my foot down. Piece of cake. Just stay here in case I need you. He closed his eyes and took my hand, then peeked one back open. Did they watch them in order of release or chronologically? I huffed and bumped him with my shoulder. I don't care, just pick one. All right, he said, shrugging. But it might matter. They're diehards. I heaved a sigh and shook my head, trying to decide if I was more irritated because he was getting hung up on the details or because he almost sucked me down the rabbit hole with him. Order of release, then. That's how normal people watch movies. When he started to object, I pinched him for wasting time. I said order of release. No debate, just do it. Somebody had to be the grown-up and get things done. Okay, now we're on to chapter 19. And oh, thank you very much, Rose. I'm glad you like hearing me. I'm not sure if I know Peter Mon. Is that his pen name or does he, I've been kind of out of the loop lately and I haven't really met a lot of people. But I hope to meet him. It's always nice to meet fellow authors, and I hope if he pops in, he enjoys my work. Let's see. Okay, we're going to move on to chapter 19 then. An hour later, Eli had implanted a nice, if fuzzy, morning of watching movies into both of their minds. It made it much easier that Sarah had been out of town on a business trip. I'm not sure what John had done since he'd been possessed, but I'm sure Eli made it good. While Eli and I had been doing that, Jake had set the house to rights. We propped John and Sarah on the couch, put Return of the Jedi in the Blu-ray player, and left. Once outside, all in all, it was the best outcome I could have hoped for. Wow, I said, examining our handiwork. I won't tell Mom that you actually know how to clean. Jake grinned at me. Doesn't matter. She wouldn't believe you anyway. That was the truth. He was a hopeless slob. Okay, kids, Eli said, opening the front door. Let's blow this popsicle stand. As we made our way down the walk, Jake muttered the counter to the sleep spell, and I sort of wished I could be a fly on the wall to make sure they were okay. They're fine, Eli said, taking my hand. He knew without me saying a word what was going through my head, as always. My stomach grumbled, and I smiled when Sarah's voice floated to us from her backyard, asking the dog what he was barking at. Oh, nothing, Mom. Dad was just possessed by a psycho. I was locked outside and our house was full of people 10 minutes ago. It's fine though. Just give me a cookie and we'll call it square. Oh crap, I said, looking at my phone as I climbed into Jake's SUV. I had to meet James for coffee. I need to run by my house anyway, Eli said. I told Mom I'd help her move some furniture out to her shop. Why don't you go do that? Then we'll meet up at the Jolly Roger later. After the day we've had, I think a beer or four is in order. That works for me, I said. Jake? I'm out, he replied, then looked a little smug. I had a date. Ooh, who is it? I asked. Glinda from the Stop and Go? I know you two've been chatting each other up. No, Eli said, his face alight with the hint of good gossip at Jake's expense. It's Michelle, the new history prof at the university. I saw him talking in the gallery the other day. Jake's face flushed and he scowled. It's none of your business. There's no way I'm telling you two who it is until I'm sure I like her. Eli shot me a smug expression. Told you it was Michelle. Just don't make a big deal out of it, okay? I really like her, Jake said. Usually I'd delight in Jake's discomfort, but I wanted him to find a nice girl. He'd had his share of relationship nightmares and deserved a good one. We won't, we promise, Eli said. I was surprised when he beat me to the punch because he wasn't usually as merciful as I was. We spent the rest of the drive to the estate rehashing what had gone down that day. It wasn't something I ever wanted to repeat, so I was glad that particular curse was unique. Some of the others were terrifying, though, so I was reserving judgment for which one was the worst until we had them all safely back and cleansed. I was never so glad to see home as I was when we pulled in, I don't think. Unlike most houses, ours was moss green, which gave it an earthy feel. Some people described it as spooky, but they were mostly the same ones who thought I was weird. I'd developed a tough skin over the years and had learned to tune the haters out, and my life had grown exponentially better once I had. As I stepped out of the SUV, my whole body felt like lead. All I wanted to do was trudge up the steps to my tower and crash, or at least put something on TV and tune the world out for a while. That wasn't going to happen, though. I had to go face the music and hopefully get some closure. You sure you're going to be okay? Eli asked, concern etched on his face. I don't care whether he wants to meet you alone or not. If you want, I'll go with you. Nah, I said, heaving a sigh. It's been a long time coming. It's fine. Okay then, he said, climbing into a sporty blue BMW. Call me when it's over. Good luck on your date, I called to Jake as he climbed the steps to the house, and he tossed away over my shoulder. Good luck with your whatever it is, and have fun at the Jolly Roger. Climbing into my car, I started it and blasted the air conditioning, then just leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a minute, gathering the courage to deal with my past. Hey, Sage! Sophie, the owner of the coffee shop, called when I walked in. Oh, I'm sorry, we started a new chapter. Oh, okay, Rose. For some reason, I read it in there that he was an author. He's just a YouTube follower. That's okay. I hope he loves it. Either way, I hope he manages to pop in. I think I'm probably going to go ahead and read book 2 in this series for lives. Do you guys like doing the lives? Is that something you're interested in doing? I have fun doing it, but we don't get a lot of people usually. So anyway, let's get back to book 20 or chapter 20. Hey, Sage! Sophie, the owner of the coffee shop, called when I walked in. At 40, she was a beautiful woman with long brunette locks and big hazel eyes. She also happened to be a witch, which was something even I hadn't known until recently. She'd moved to Marauders Bay from Tampa and opened the shop 5 years or so ago, right after she'd gotten a divorce. Unlike most shop owners, she'd refused to toe the pirate line and had opted to go with the homey theme for her little cafe. She served sandwiches and soup during lunch and bagels for breakfast, preferring to keep it simple. She only had one employee, Rachel, who worked part-time. Sophie said she liked running it herself because it kept her busy and in touch with the town. I slid into a back booth where James and I would hopefully have some privacy. Since it was almost closing time, I doubted that would be an issue. I was currently the only customer there. Hey, Sophie, how's it going? The trim woman bustled over and slid into the booth across from me. Good, but rumor has it you're looking for some items that you accidentally sent to an auction yesterday. I heard they were already sold and you'd like to give them to the original owner. Is that true? I nodded and debated telling her the truth. She was, after all, a witch and might be an ally. Her eyes twinkled as she watched for my reaction. Yeah, I said, shifting my weight, or at least part of it is. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. Let me guess which part. As soon as I touched those pieces, I felt the bad juju. I tried to get more, but I didn't have the cash to do it. At the time, I didn't realize they'd come from Parker's because there was such a mix of pieces. I'm curious where they came from and how they got out for public consumption, though. I need coffee in order to walk you through it, I said, checking my phone. I still had 15 minutes until James was due to meet me. Hold that thought then, she said, and returned in a couple minutes with my usual iced caramel latte, triple shots. She knew me well. I told her the whole story from the moment Eli got the bad feeling, and she listened without interrupting. Wow, she said, her eyes wide. You have your work cut out for you. It so happens, though, that I cleansed these already. I hope you weren't planning something else, because I couldn't keep them around like that. That warmer would have burned my house down for sure. I shook my head. Only if you would have put hot coals in it first. Ah, she said, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's what that little something extra was in the curse. I felt it, but I didn't know what it was. Do they all have that? I shook my head. Not all of them, but a lot of them. 2/3, maybe. Are these the first you've recovered? She asked. And how many are there? 43 total, as far as we know. We've recovered one this morning, plus the 2 you have, so we're down to 40. I guess that makes for a nice round number of evil. Often murderous, cursed items to track down, right? She reached across the table and patted my hand. I have faith in you. And for the record, I would have done the same thing. You couldn't just roll them back out into the ocean and leave them there. With as many tourists as we have, somebody would have surely found it eventually, and then where would we be? Now, do you want them back? Not unless, no offense, you want me to double check to make sure they're safe. Or unless you just don't want them. She shook her head, and her expression amused. I'm good. I'm a lot older than I look, and that wasn't my first run-in with the nasties. And I like them, so if you're good with me keeping them, I am. I do have to say, though, the curses were well built. Be careful. It wouldn't surprise me, since they were specifically looking to get even with witches, if they booby-trapped them to do something not so nice when you break the curses. I pulled in a breath and huffed it out through my cheeks. I was really hoping I was just being paranoid worrying about that, I told her with a wry smile. Nope, she said, popping the pea. I'd be on the lookout if I were you. If you need any help, you know where to find me. Thanks for the warning and the offer, I said. I may just have to take you up on that. The bell above the door rang, and I took a deep breath when James stepped into the room. He glanced around, then headed in my direction. Hey, he said, want to sit outside? It's beautiful out. It was hot enough to melt steel, but I humored him, waiting while he got his coffee, then following him to the little cafe tables arranged on the patio out back. I adjusted the umbrellas, so at least we had some shade. There was one sure way to tell a Floridian from a tourist. Very few of us opted to sit outside and enjoy the sunshine when it was hotter than Satan's pepper patch out. AC all the way, baby. Sorry, he said. I know it's more comfortable in there, but I didn't want Sophie to overhear us. I did my best to hide my smile. I hadn't been able to out myself to him, so there was no way I was going to out Sophie. He cleared his throat and took a couple drinks of his coffee, avoiding eye contact, and I sat there with my elbows on the table, fidgeting with my armlet. Time to grow a spine and take the bull by the horns. Look, I know you have a ton of questions, and I'm sorry about the way you found out about me. That's not the way it should have gone down. For the first time, he looked me in the eye. I might have understood, I mean, if you just told me. He raked his fingers through his sandy hair. Or maybe I would. Or maybe I would have. I don't know. I still don't even know what I saw for sure that day. What are you? I'm a witch. I can do lots of things, but my primary gifts are all earth or air based. So you can do more than just blow up rocks? He asked, and I was happy to hear there was at least a little bit of humor in his tone. I smiled. Yeah, I can do a little more than that. No need to tell him I could probably blow up a mountain if I wanted. Baby steps. He took a few seconds to digest that, then asked the question that would have been my first, too. Can you read my mind or make me do things? I shook my head. No, I can't do either of those things, and I can't manipulate emotions either. I smiled. Well, I'm pretty good at making people mad, but that's a human skill, not a witchy one. What about Eli? Oh, how to answer that one. I know it wouldn't matter to Eli if I confessed his witchiness, but I wasn't sure how much to confess. Since, he could actually make people do things. I figured that was best left out. Eli's like me. My whole family is, though we all have different gifts. He nodded, chewing on that for a minute, then leaned across the table, his brown eyes tortured. I wish you told me. I loved you. It's not like it could have ended any worse than it did. I pulled a deep breath in and blew it out slowly, then rolled my head on my neck. I know. I wish I would have. But I just cared about you so much, and we were getting along so well. I kept telling myself that today would be the day that I tell you. Then I'd chicken out or things would come up. I really am sorry. I loved you too. A crow landed on the railing just a few feet away and tilted its head at us. I tossed it a piece of the donut I'd barely touched and just waited for James to say something. Rather than eat the donut, the bird just stared at us, then walked down the railing and back again. Weird birds. Do you still? He asked, bringing me back to the situation. Do I still what? I asked, then realized what he was asking me. Oh, wow, I stuttered, unsure how to answer. That was the one question I hadn't come to this meeting prepared to answer. Did I? It had been 5 years. I was still scrambling for an answer when the crow leapt into flight and zoomed right over our table, knocking my coffee over. I jumped up to avoid wearing caramel latte, and James moved toward me with a pile of napkins. I'm sorry, he said, avoiding eye contact again while he sopped up the mess. I shouldn't have asked that. I'm not sure what came over me. No, it's okay, I said, stuffing my hair behind my ears as I stepped back from the table. I'd managed to mostly avoid the spill, though I did have a few splatters. Wet shorts were the least of my concern right then, though. I just wasn't ready for it. I'm not really sure how to answer. Well, he said, smiling up at me, you didn't say no. No, I replied, a little flummoxed as to why. Was I just trying not to hurt his feelings, or did I really not know the answer? I didn't, did I? Can we just forget I asked and move on? He looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Sure, I said, moving to gather my empty cup and the soggy napkins. But I need to go. I'm meeting Eli, and we have some things to do. Not strictly a lie, but it wasn't imperative. I could have stayed and continued the conversation, but I'd had about all I could handle for the moment. Oh, okay, he said, then took a breath. I really turned this into the nightmare we were both afraid it was going to be, didn't I? I tried to summon a smile. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm going to go, but we'll talk later, all right? I still need to brief you on what's going on if you want to know more. If not, if anything weird or unexplainable happens, please call me. What do you mean, weird or unexplainable? He asked. I pressed my lips together. I wish I knew for sure. Weird deaths, people behaving erratically, random fires, or just anything that you can't explain. You have my number. Sure, he said, moving toward the door with me. I'll give you a call in a couple of days. I'd like to have a little more information on that, if you don't mind. That works, I said, then lit out of there like my hair was on fire. I'd come to give him answers, but felt like I was the one leading with the questions. Okay. End of chapter 20. Yeah, I love these live streams too. I I'm not sure how to get more people to them. I think that probably the key would be to like maybe send something out to my newsletter subscribers in advance, like 15, 20 minutes in advance or a half hour. But I hate to bomb people with newsletters. I feel like I don't want to bother them, but I also want them to come and listen. So I'm not sure what the actual answer is there. But I'd love to see, now that I'm starting, you guys have helped me get comfortable. So thank you for that. So now I'd love to see more people coming in. Boy, if I could get my hands on that woman who coughed on Tim, I'd cough on her back. No, I wouldn't. I'd choke her. Kidding, sort of. All right, chapter 21. Once I was back in my car, I leaned my head back and took a few deep breaths. Adrenaline still coursed through me, and I felt like I'd run a marathon. I about jumped out of my skin when somebody pecked on my window. Expecting it to be James, I rolled it down. Did I forget something? I asked as I rolled down my window. Excuse me. Rather than James, though, I found Luther staring down at me. His expression was indiscernible. Not that I know of, he said. I had to drop my car off to get new tires and I saw your car. Oh, I said, not sure how else to continue the conversation. After what I'd just been through, the only company I wanted came from a cold tap. So what are you doing? I'm assuming your meeting with the cop is over. A smile slid across his face, and I found myself more tense than ever, despite the fact that he was obviously trying to put me at ease. It is, and now I'm going to go drink, I said, pushing in the clutch and hitting the start button on my car. Want some company? He asked, his eyes still warm. He laid his hand on my arm, which I had propped on the window frame. Suddenly, the tension drained from me and I was able to breathe again. I sighed with relief, glad that though the meeting had been a disaster, it was over. I'm just on my way to the Jolly Roger to meet Eli. I stopped short of telling him he was welcome to join us. I wanted a good old-fashioned bitch and rant session, and that was best done with just the two of us. Great, he said. I could use a beer. He hopped around to the passenger side and slid his long legs into the space, then moved the seat back and settled into the bucket seat. Please, I said, pasting a smile on my face, do join me. Thanks, he said with a bright, obtuse smile. I'd like that. I called Eli on the way there and told him the meeting was over and that I was on my way to the Jolly Roger. What I really wanted to do was rant and rave, but I couldn't hardly do that with Luther in the seat next to me. He told me he'd meet me in an hour or so, which was fine. I didn't mind getting a head start. I assume you'd been here, I said, when I pulled into the gravel lot. He nodded. Oh yeah, many times, though it's been a while. Does he still do after-hours poker? I smiled despite myself. He does, and my skunk regularly partakes. He raised a brow. Your skunk? Yeah, I replied, maneuvering into a spot at the far side of the lot where other people weren't likely to park. I didn't want to have to kill somebody for banging their doors into my car. Well, he's not my skunk per se. He just lives with us. I see, he said. Everything's clear as mud now. He's sort of a roommate more than a skunk. He's a familiar, sort of. Not mine, though. My grandmother's. Or that was sort of the situation when she was alive, and he's just hung around ever since. Oh, so he's magical, he said, understanding lacing his tone. Yeah, now enough about my skunk. I'm ready for a beer. Me too, he said, sliding me a sideways look as we walked across the lot. And I have a wicked craving for wings. It hit me this morning during the meeting. I looked at him and was irritated when a secretive smile curved his lips. I thought back to the meeting, where we'd spoken with the three women. I'd been picturing him as a rat eating out of a dumpster to keep my wayward thoughts at bay when we'd been sitting waiting for the women to speak. Surely not. Have you now? I asked, frowning. I have, but let's not give it a second thought. He opened the door for me, and I breathed a sigh of relief when the cool air hit me. Summer in Florida was brutal, but I wouldn't trade it for snow for any amount of money. We picked a corner table so that we could observe without having people milling around us. I wasn't in the mood to socialize, though I was starting to regain my equilibrium. Are you okay? He asked when I shivered. Yeah, I said. Talking to James was just a little more stressful than I thought it would be. And he asked some tough questions. Only one, really, but I wasn't about to tell Luther that. Bert, a squat, beefy guy with a dark complexion and friendly eyes, brought us over 2 beers, my big wave, and an IPA for Luther. I started you a tab, he said, smiling and wiping the condensation from the mugs on his apron. You want food? And by the way, Big Wave is a local beer. Well, it's actually not local. It's from Hawaii, but they serve it everywhere. Here it's a Kona beer, and it's a really nice light golden ale, blonde ale. It is so good. So anyway, that was just be skipping. Okay, you want food? Wings, I said, smiling back. My regular, please. Hot garlic. Luther held up 2 fingers, indicating to bring him the same. Won't be long, Bert said with a friendly wink before heading back to the bar. He knows what you drink, I said. That had surprised me a little for some reason. Of course, he replied after taking a drink. I told you I'd come here. It's been a while, but not that long. The beer was amazing, cold and frothy as the first big gulp slid down my throat. When you're hot, stressed, and about to snap, there was nothing like that first drink. I decided then and there to ask Luther who and what he was outright, but somehow it was like he knew. Not now, Sage, he said as he took another long pull from his beer. Soon, but not now. I sighed. That seemed to be the sentence that summed up my entire life. Everything was in a holding pattern. I was waiting for artifacts to turn up, hopefully without anybody dying. I was waiting for James to call and push for another inevitable meeting. And now Luther, the mysterious man who'd slipped into my life and turned my emotions upside down, was evading telling me who and even what he was. Excuse me. Still, though, in that very moment, I forced myself to chill. The beer was cold, the bar was dim, and the guy was hot. In just a few minutes, the best friend a person could ask for would show up and beat me at pool, and I'd go home with a full belly and a better outlook. I knew my life was about to go completely sideways, but somehow I also knew it was going to work out okay. Okay, and that is it for the rest of the books, or for the book. Yeah, the hot garlic rose is actually my favorite wing too. I love it. I had to go almost a year, well, a little more than a year actually, because I couldn't bite anything. I had a crazy dental procedure done, and I was on soft foods and had to cut it up everything into little pieces for months and months. And the first thing I did when I was actually ready, able to eat again, was just destroy some wings. So, yeah, the wings, and I'm a huge cheesecake lover. It's one of the few sweets I actually like: cheesecake and strawberry shortcake. Now, give me a bag of chips and I will mess them up. But ice cream will sit in. It's not that I don't like it; it's that I don't crave it. But it'll sit in my freezer burn before I remember it's in there again. But a bag of wavy Lays doesn't stand a chance. So, well, do you guys have any more questions tonight? I know Tim has put up some new merch on our website, and I also have. I'm not sure if you guys I'm sure you probably read too, but also listening. I'm going to have a new book 4 in my Midlife Magic series is coming out. My Shot of Midlife Magic series is coming out on the 15th. I'm going to try to do the audio for that one. I would love to have Megan do it, but right now she's booked and I just can't afford to have it done yet. It's those books are about $2,500 a piece, and I can't bite that off right now. But I do want it in narration, and I want the third one in narration too. So, yeah, I'm excited. I love that series, and not only that, this is book 4. So since I wrapped up everything in book 3, what I'm going to do is the first 3 is going to be kind of a trilogy. And now 4, 5, and 6 is a separate story. And we're going to have smarmy zombie pirate women. They're not zombies per se, they're actually witches. But, they come, there are zombies involved. But, this coven of witches went down with their ship way back when they had 3 coins: coin of knowledge, the coin of wisdom, and the coin of time. And the 3 coins have been separated because they've been abused. Fire of London, all this stuff. The coins, when they came together, caused these huge disasters. So this coven and the oracle had decided that they needed separated permanently. So now the witches took one down with them. They chased this ship down and they took one with them. Then their ship was sinking, so they teleported the other 2 to, well, you'll find out in the book, but to other people. And something happened and somebody managed to steal the one that was on their ship, waking the coven up from, kind of like a magical alarm. So now they come ashore and dragon. They pulled the whole like Pirates of the Caribbean thing where they're covered in barnacles and all this when they come to the bar, and Jules is not sure. She has no idea what to do except for they're making a mess on her bar, and she isn't going to tolerate that from anybody, regardless of whether they're barnacle covered people who trudged out of the sea. But yeah, I'm so excited for it. There's going to be a lot of big battles. There's going to be a lot of snark. There's going to be, a little more side of romance with her and Ronan, of course, because the sparks lie there. But it's also going to be a growth and a growth trilogy for her too. So she's really coming into her own. And yeah, and I've also got one called Soul Keeper. It's in a totally different series. You've heard me mention Kira in my other series, like as a side character. She's been in Witches of Keyhole Lake, and she's been in the Enchanted Coast. And so I'm going to bring her in. She has her own series. It's just going to be a trilogy. But I kind of wanted to give her own little side stories. And Stan is doing very well, in fact. Stan's one of my favorite characters. He just popped into my imagination in the middle of the scene. Like, I was sitting there writing the scene, and all of a sudden this big chubby blonde guy in a diaper with a golden bow just popped onto the bar stool beside of me, and his name was Stan. So yeah. Wow, am I getting my characters right there? Yes. So that'll be all for tonight. I really appreciate you guys joining me. And yep. Yes, it's a loincloth. I'm sorry, not a diaper. Good catch. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys joining me, and I'll set up one. Do you want me to do book 2 in this, or would you rather hear something else? Because I can do either the second one in this one, or I can start another Stan in his loincloth. And I can just picture, like, the whole, I love you, man. I love you, man. How people get when they're drinking too much. I could just picture, can you imagine having a Cupid in the bar firing arrows into people like that? Okay, I will pick then. It'll probably be the second book in this series because I love this series. So anyway, I really appreciate you guys joining me, and I will see you the next time. Night.